All eyes were on Washington last week as public hearings over Canada-U.S. trade began. But on Friday, attention ramped up as Prime Minister Mark Carney headed to D.C. for the first time since trade talks disintegrated.
This is the #1 sport.
Carney was actually talking about soccer as his visit kicked off a FIFA event. But that could also relate to trade talks, or maybe that's become more of a blood sport.
I got to tell the story. And Paraguay comes up. Paraguay gets picked. And I said, "Whoa, Paraguay, they're good. They're good. But don't worry. Don't worry, President Trump says, okay, so they're good." And I said, "But don't worry, they're not, no, they won't be, because they're supposed to be, you're D, so they'll be in C." And then one of the rules kicks in and they get moved over to D. So Paraguay's in the U.S. And the president's like, "Well, that's not good." And I was like, "Don't worry. These are just recommendations. We have to sign off on them." Gianni was not. He didn't find that as funny as the rest of us did. And we, you know the way the president sometimes gets something in his mind? He kept coming back to that as we were going on. So look at the draw as being indicative. It is also about winning.
Earlier in the week, a 3-day-long hearing was held by the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in D.C. All sorts of business and policy groups clamored for a spot to be heard, urging the Trump administration not to scrap the North American free trade deal. On Thursday, though, they were disheartened to hear this.
It expires in about a year, and we'll either let it expire or we'll maybe work out another deal with Mexico and Canada. But look, Mexico and Canada have taken advantage of the United States, like just about every other country, in all fairness. It's not them, I'm not blaming them. But the beautiful thing about the tariffs is we'll start paying off that debt. The money coming in, they're finding money in our country now that they never knew existed.
By early next month, the U.S. Trade Representative will tell Congress if any of last week's public consultations had any effect on the president. Laura Dawson is the head of the Future Borders Coalition, and she joins us from Washington just before heading back home. Dr. Dawson, welcome to the West Block. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
So you were in D.C. for the 3 days of public consultations. What was your goal?
My goal was to really advance a Canada-U.S. cooperative narrative to make sure that people understand the importance of continuing the CUSMA, and that while it could be improved, it should not be abandoned, and that we need to do the work. So I was with a relatively small group of Canada-U.S. business leaders, and we did the best we could getting that message across.
Well, you can have the most compelling argument, but if there isn't somebody to listen, it might be a fool's errand. So who from the administration was there to listen?
So that's why this was so important, is because you've got a lot of political noise in D.C. Talking about trade, talking about the CUSMA, but then you've got a real group of, I don't know, technocrats, the lawyers, the technical negotiators, and that's who we were talking to. The folks from USTR, the United States Trade Representative Office, but also folks from the Department of Commerce, State Department, Treasury, and they were really speaking the language of trade and rules and regulations, and that's something that Canadians do very well on. So hopefully we put enough weight on the regulatory law and order side that we can buffer against some of the political noise.
Doctor, what were you telling them? What was the thrust of your argument?
So there was different kinds of people testifying. Some people were at the high level of, this is an important agreement, the relationship is so important, there's so much investment, so much back and forth trade. Our organization focuses on supply chains and movement of people. So I tried to be really specific in talking about ways that we could improve customs facilitation and modernization, ways that we could modernize our energy trade, the importance of Great Lakes shipping, and the importance of reducing non-tariff barriers and that sort of death by 1,000 cuts that a lot of exporters feel when they're trying to do cross-border trade.
What was the tone around the table in these meetings? Was it friendly? Because what we see on television, there's a theater, there's a pageantry, if you will, when we hear the president pontificate about CUSMA and the value of it or lack thereof sometimes. What is it like when the doors are closed and maybe the cameras aren't on?
This is completely the opposite. This is dry, dull, dusty, just the way we like it. I've testified before Congress before, and it's a different thing entirely. The members of Congress are out to score political points. They don't really understand a lot of the issues, but these people are basically technocrats. They'd read all our briefings, and they were asking very specific, very well-educated questions. I got one about public-private partnerships in airports and port facilities, and so that was a question I was happy to dive into with them.
Well, that was going to be my next question about the feedback that you were given. Were they receptive to your message?
Yeah, I think they were receptive to our message. I think that there are a lot of folks in the United States that are pro USMCA CUSMA, but we as businesses and organizations need to provide them with the feedstock that they need in order to go to the table and say, okay, we've got a lot of great suggestions from businesses on both sides of the border on how we can improve the deal and certain areas that we can that we might want to modify. And so that pushes back against the political weight of let's scrap the whole deal. We don't need our partners and neighbors.
What other groups were there with you?
Oh, I beg your pardon?
What other groups were there with you?
Oh, okay. So there were 150 groups testifying in 3 days. It was quite a round robin. You know, came up, said your piece, and left. I was grouped into a very pro-Canada U.S. Coalition that included Goldie Hyder from the Business Council of Canada, Beth Burke from the Canadian American Business Council, and me. There were a couple of other Canadian-affiliated organizations elsewhere in the program, but really, there, you know, of the 150 odd people testifying, the Canada-U.S. slice was pretty narrow. So I'm glad we were there.
Meanwhile, U.S. producers have warned Donald Trump that tariffs could jeopardize their access to Canada, to Mexico. Outside of these meetings, what did they say to you?
They're really glad to hear the Canadian voice there, but we have to be very, very specific. And so I was hearing from sector organizations saying, you know, if they put these port fees on Great Lakes shippers, an entire U.S. state will lose access to Canadian road salt. Or if these lumber fees continue, it's going to increase the cost of housing by X thousands of dollars. If we can be very specific with Americans about the costs of continued tariffs, I think the more successful we can lobby to have them reduced.
Doctor, did you get the sense something will be done with these talks, or was it maybe more of a public gesture on the part of the Trump administration?
No, I would say this is the opposite. The public gestures tend to be very out there in social media, grandiose statements. This was very granular and very close. So I think that this really reinforces to the White House the importance of the agreement across so many U.S. sectors and for so many Americans. And it really reinforces that Canada is the U.S.'s best customer, and you got to treat your best customer as well as possible.
Doctor, what do you do next? What are the next steps to build on what sounds like a successful trip?
Yeah, so we'll be going into the CUSMA review this summer, and that will be a fairly technical process. And again, it will be lawyers from our side and lawyers from their side working out the elements of a deal. But again, the relationships between people, between businesses, between trading partners really have to continue. I'm a Canadian. I live in the United States, and it's not that Americans don't like Canadians. They just aren't hearing enough of them. They don't realize the extent of the relationship. They don't realize how important Canada is as a customer and an investor in the United States. So that's the work we need to continue to do.
Are there any worries that, you know, a post from Donald Trump could change things, though?
Yeah, a post from Donald Trump really could. But I think Prime Minister Carney's doing the right thing. He's down here. He's come to Washington to talk about World Cup. He's saying the right things, doing the right things, not necessarily appeasing the guy, but making sure that there's a strong rapport between the two. And at this point, that's the best we can hope for.
Dr. Dawson, safe travels, and thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Coming up next on the show, there's been a lot of talk about tankers in Northwest BC, but what's it really like to navigate those waters?